Hello, and welcome to the Open Window Institute for Emotional Freedom podcast. My name is Jesse Dean. My guest is my dear friend, actor, and brand new author, Jody Gelb. Jody has been one of my heroines for over 50 years. We met in high school, that time of uncertainty and emotional turmoil, trying to find out who we are, what we feel, and what we're capable of doing. Jody still is a talented, beautiful, kind, strong, sophisticated, humble, smart, witty, funny, flawed, and wise, vibrant woman. In a moment, you will bask in her radiant, clear authenticity, unvarnished and unmasked. Jody has a distinguished 40-year career acting on stage and screen. She has portrayed roles in the Tony Award-winning Broadway plays, the original The Who's Tommy, Titanic, Big River, and Wicked. Jody has also played Joan of Arc's mother in the David Byrne rock opera Joan of Arc, Into the Fire, and was featured in the world premiere of Shel Silverstein's Wildlife. On television, Jody has appeared in guest roles in Gunplay, Law and Order, and Dr. Death. Jody is a loving daughter, sister, and friend. She has also been a devoted wife and heroic mother of two beautiful, precious daughters. Jody is now proudly following the exciting musical career of her youngest daughter, Dora Jar, who is a talented, exciting, dramatic singer-songwriter gaining renown as a rising bedroom pop star. Dora's older sister, Luiza Wanda, is the raison d'etre of Jody's first book, titled She May Be Lying Down, But She May Be Very Happy. Luiza Wanda tragically passed away at the age of 16 and a half due to complications from infantile cerebral palsy, which was the result of a tragic medical injury at birth. There are many challenges in life that will temper our spirit, but few as formidable than when a young mother is informed that her newborn child will be permanently disabled by an injury at birth. The shock, anger, and despair would crush the hope out of most of us. So it is with great humility and admiration that I share with you the grace, love, resilience, and determination that Jody Gelb reveals in her first book. She may be lying down, but she may be very happy. A micro-memoir published by Kelson Books. To give you proper context for Jody's brilliant book, we will now watch a short film made by Jody Gelb honoring her daughter, Luiza Wanda.
I met Jacek in Warsaw in 1988. I was on a theater tour. He had a son. He could whistle Puccini. My father thought he might be a communist spy. Get rid of him. 11 months later, we married in their living room. Before the wedding, he showed me his plastic wedding shoes from Poland. I ran around the corner to Harry's Shoes on Broadway and bought a pair of size 12 leather Oxfords. He wouldn't wear them. These are too expensive. My grandmother, when she met him for the first time, told him, "You are Jody's greatest tragedy. When are you going back to Poland?" When our daughter was born, her brain didn't get enough oxygen. Emergency doctors intubated her and rushed her to intensive care. My husband held my hand. I made moaning sounds, I think. One of the doctors came back with a piece of paper. Tiny, inky footprints. We named her for our mothers. Luiza Wanda. We didn't know what would happen. Would she walk with a limp? Would people stare at her? I saw children in wheelchairs everywhere. I screamed, I wept, or I was frozen. I pleaded with my husband, "Will she always be lying down?" He said, "She may be lying down, but she may be very happy." she may be lying down, but she may be very happy. And we woke up and started again.
Please join me now in my inspiring and revealing conversation with the incomparable Jody Gelb. I'm really interested in the person who wrote this book. The book is absolutely amazing.
Oh,
I've read it twice now.
Thank you so much. That's the advantage of it being a micro-memoir. It's
micro-memoir, yes.
very short, and when you give it to a friend, if they do want to see it, you don't feel like, I'm handing them a 357-page tome. I mean, I've gotten to be I'm a good reader sometimes, and a lot of the times I'm a bad reader. Fiction is where I'm having the problem. Nonfiction, I read a lot of nonfiction on my phone or on the computer. But yeah, I'm having a hard time focusing on fiction. So
you mentioned just a moment ago that you wrote this over 20 years.
On and off.
On and off.
I had never written I guess if we journal, write little journals, you do write in this kind of form, which is prose or, normal sentences, as opposed to what I had done years before was I had written monologues for myself starting around 1983, 84. I would put the tape recorder on because all of a sudden I would be speaking like this. I would say, I don't know if I could spend my whole life in the kitchen, in the kitchen with the cooking and the cleaning. I mean, I don't really think that I have the capacity to spend my whole life in the kitchen, in the kitchen with the cooking and the washing. I mean, physically, I don't think this stuff just came out of me. And
channeled.
So I would record it, and then eventually I'd write it by pen on, construction paper. And because I wanted to be an actor and I was trying to get jobs, I started creating these little one-person solo shows with these extended characters. So I had that woman who was, I gave her the name of Miranda Savage. She was an artist. She blew up things like ovens and then reconstructed them. And then, there was a woman who was talking like this, who had twins named Sasha and Joshua.
From New Hampshire?
No, she was more from the New York area.
Oh.
Sasha and Joshua, get in the car. So that was the first kind of writing I ever did, was for my one-person shows. And then, I don't know, somewhere in the early 2000s, my friend who is a writer and writes all the time. He also has a son, I had a daughter. He has a son who is very disabled, and they were at the same little special school in California. And he said, maybe we'll write something together. How would you describe arriving at the bridge school? And he was just, I don't know, he was trying to get me to write something. So I started writing these little pieces about my daughter, Luiza, and this life we were all living, which, had some extreme things about it. And he was very encouraging about my writing. He liked it for some reason. So I kept writing these little stories, little pieces, all true, all about what I was going through with my daughter. my now ex-husband, our strange little life, and eventually, maybe a couple years later, I thought, well, I don't know if I knew I didn't have a book. I wouldn't have said that. I would have said, I just had to write these little things. And years were going by, and I was quitting and then starting again. And because I had no confidence as a writer, I thought, you're an actor, you're not a writer, so what are you doing? And I put it away for a while. So this just went on and off for a long, long time. And I would say it really was about 2 decades. And then I would eventually always come back to it. And at some point I thought, oh, maybe it's a little memoir, and maybe somehow I could find some little publisher, some little nonprofit press.
When did that happen?
That was a miracle, because I wasn't sending it out to anybody. I'd sent it out to 2 agents that friends of mine have. They said, oh, yeah, I like your writing, send it to my agent. And I sent earlier drafts of the manuscript, and they both said kind of the same thing, which was, oh, we like it very much, but, the big but was, it's a memoir and it's not for us, but thanks so much.
The question I was asking was, when in your head did you think, I want to turn this into a book? I'm going from being an essayist to, I want to do this book. What was the impetus for that? The spark inside that said, you know what? It should be a book.
I think when I had a certain number of pages, I probably looked around and thought, well, maybe this is a book. I don't know how to do that, because you hear the book talk people. What's the structure? Mm-hmm. What's this? What's that? And I thought, I don't know. I don't know what the structure is. I don't know how this is going to happen, but I have this instinctual feeling that if those little pieces are ordered properly, that it can be a whole piece. It can be a book. And then my friend Kirby, who I thank in my acknowledgement, because
I loved your acknowledgments. Yeah,
he would always just kind of be very no nonsense and say, just keep writing. Just keep going. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't build anything up, but he would say, I really like the voice. I like the voice. And keep going. And once in a while, I went off for 3 days and went and did a little workshop, let's say, one was with a wonderful writer named Mark Matusek. One was with this writer that so many people love and know named Abigail Thomas. Mm. And I would I'd show like 7 pages or 8 pages. And then I'd get positive feedback and I'd think, oh, okay, maybe it is something. It could be something. So just keep going. And, it just went on like that forever. And then finally, what happened really was I wasn't sending it out. It was in my computer. And I had, there's a writer that I really like. She is almost completely nonfiction writer named Megan Daum. And I happened to see on the internet that she was teaching a Zoom workshop that was a nonfiction workshop. And I thought, aha, if I can get in the workshop, what I'm going to do is show some of the pages, because the idea is that, people go to these workshops on Zoom or in person, and you quote workshop your pages. So you share a week ahead. If you're going to be on that week, the week ahead, you'll send in your 9 pages or whatever it is. And you'll get a lot of feedback. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get in the workshop. I'm going to share some of the pages, and I'm going to make the decision. Yes, this is something, and I could possibly get it published, or you know what, it's nice, but you could just self-publish it, So I got did the workshop, and then I actually did 2 kind of in a row, or there was a little break in between. And I started to get extremely positive feedback from the people in the workshop. This one woman wrote me like the day before I was going to be talking with everybody in the Zoom class. And she wrote me and said, I can see this. I know this is getting published. I know that. then Megan gave me extremely positive feedback, and she's somebody who's not at all sentimental. We had no personal connection. She was coming to it completely cold. And this made me think, okay, it is something. It is something. And then we kept in touch loosely. And once in a while she'd say, oh, this small press, because she said it's going to take something off the main drag. It's not going to be a big publisher. And I said, that's what I've kind of imagined, something small. So she mentioned a couple things, like a small book publishing company that was doing a contest for nonfiction. Submitted to that. That didn't happen. And a year ago, roughly in December, a year ago, out of the blue, she called me and said, a small publishing company just called me and asked me, do I have any writers that I would recommend, because they're looking to do their next book. So I recommended your manuscript, and here's their email. And, do what you will. So I wrote this email to Kelson Books. Hello, thank you. Here's the manuscript. 2.5 weeks later, I'm in Florida visiting my dad. And I've kind of started checking my email every day because I thought, well, maybe I'll hear from them pretty soon. I see that I've got an email from them, and I know what it's going to say. Thank you. We really like it. Beautiful. But no, it's not for us. And instead, it was the opposite of that. They said all sorts of nice things, and they said, we love it, and we would like to publish your book. I couldn't believe it. It was.
What was your emotion at that moment?
I was so overjoyed. I couldn't believe it. I immediately called Megan to say this had happened. And, and then we talked about the realities that, a tiny publishing company, which this is, sometimes they go out of business, before the book gets published. So I had overwhelming, I couldn't believe this was happening.
What date was that?
I have to check. It was like the third week, around the middle to the third week of January
of
a year ago.
A year ago.
Almost exactly. So weird. Almost exactly a year ago.
And they had it for how many weeks?
They wrote right back in 2.5 weeks.
2.5 weeks. Okay.
And then, of course, the fear started to come immediately.
What was the sound of the fear?
The main sound of the fear was this. They're going to ask you to do something that you can't do because you're not a real writer. There's going to be a big but. It's going to be, we love it, but you need to do this with the right, you need to do some kind of overhaul or rearranging of it that I will know that's not a skill. I don't have that skill set. I can't do that. So that was one of the fears. Another fear was I wrote about some very personal things.
Yes, you did.
So it would be outing myself in certain ways in terms of, some extreme neurosis and complications of my marriage that did not work out the way it was, quote, supposed to work out, that I had written, I thought very, very respectfully and very lovingly about my former husband. But I also thought, oh my God, finally he might see it. And is he going to be angry with me and all of this stuff?
How long did that voice echo inside your head?
Well, the next thing that happened was when I got home, we agreed, I guess soon after that, a couple weeks later, maybe, we decided, we were going to I was going to meet them on Zoom. One of them's in Portland, one of them Portland, Oregon, one of them's in Bozeman, Montana, where he teaches. And they're both writers, of course. And we had this lovely Zoom where they're saying all the nice things that we felt. And then they came to the but.
And the but was?
That moment happened. It really freaked me out for a second. One of the guys said, but there's this 30-page section between this and this. I have to tell you, it repels me.
Whoa.
And I said, oh, okay, say a little more. Or, I probably didn't say that, but okay. Then Scott spoke and said, well, no, I don't have that feeling. I just think, there may be some things in that section that you want to make a decision whether or not, it needs to be in the book. So we finished the call. I immediately called Megan, he said, repel. And so she sort of laughed and said, whoa, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, well, don't worry about that. Don't worry about it.
That's strong language.
And then I quickly was emailing with Scott and just saying, look, be completely open with me. Let's talk about that section. Mm-hmm. What do you think needs to go? And where do you tell me your honest feelings? And so from then on, for the next couple of months, from then on, right away, he was saying about this section. I thought, okay, I don't need that to be in there.
What was it?
I think there was some more, I think it was more personal stuff. They wanted to focus the book more with what it's about, the center story of my daughter, Luiza. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think they felt that it was too much, maybe backstory, hyperneurotic issues. That when I looked at it with Scott, who I trusted both of them, but Scott, I had read already one of his beautiful nonfiction books. So I really, really trusted him. And then it was very easy to just go, boop, okay, put that over there, put that over there. Oh, he rearranged this. I had already rearranged it just the way he had. So we quickly figured what was going to leave. And then that was it. And then all we did was line edit back and forth very slowly because, he writes and he teaches. And the line editing was everything from, I think there should be a comma here. And you'd look at it, and the program was very wonderful. You'd move your cursor over the comma. It would say, Scott thinks there needs to be a comma here. Do you agree? Disagree. And you would click on agree. One time it was discussing the word crone. I used the word crone. I think I have a chapter with the word crone in it. And he said, it's a very negative word, negative about women or something about that. And I said, I think I'm trying to take the word crone back, the way some people try to take a word back and actually say, no, this is a good word. It's got all sorts of
like magic. Cock queen. You use the word cock queen, and the way the definition that I looked up, because I thought, okay, this is like a cuckold, but it's a female cuckold, right?
Version.
But it's more than that.
Really?
It's a woman that enjoys watching her date with another woman. Oh, and no. I thought, is that what she meant? That's not what she said. Oh, that's not what the message is.
That's so funny. Scott never found that because he was so did such fine tuning with everything in terms of what about this? You mentioned this 3 paragraphs before, and now you're mentioning it again. And then you'd look and go, oh yeah, let me move that sentence. But that never came up. And that word I discovered in the heart of my insanity of this, whatever happened between my husband and some Irish woman. I discovered that word, I believe, in about 1993. When I was going through what felt to me like the tortures of the damned. Mm-hmm. And actually the only thing that helped me through that at times was I had a typewriter and I was typing things out because I was just having a really hard time with it. And I think that's when our memory is so tricky, but I think that's when I discovered the word cuck queen. And to me, what the definition I read was just a woman whose husband is cheating on her.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting that he never
I
came.
looked it up on AI.
Oh, interesting. I would have been sad to lose that word because
it's a great word.
Yeah.
But I didn't recognize it. I figured what it meant.
Right.
But I said, I better check to see what she really meant. And am I missing this or not? I thought that your description of your torment was so authentically brilliant. Genius, actually, because I can imagine the torment being beyond your ability to articulate it at the time because of the intensity of your world shattering.
Right.
But you captured it in such brief. It's just remarkable. You are a writer. I mean, you are first and foremost a writer, and then you're an actress.
That's so interesting.
I believe that.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, that was such a crazy time. The two of the main horrific things in my life, what got me through in many ways was theater, because when that was happening, I was doing 8 shows a week, as I said, with the Who's
Right. You said it was therapy.
Yeah.
Oh.
And, I was in a dressing room with about, 7 women. I told everybody what was going on. I was surrounded with so much love and support. And I had to do 8 shows a week, which was, thank God, it was a huge anchor. And then I had that experience of being in Wicked on the road when Luiza died, and making the decision, which, I have some regrets about going back to work so quickly because of my other daughter. It's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was selfish, I guess, but it was the best thing for me because I went back to 8 shows a week. And that's how I got through the beginning of that. It changes and grows and changes, but it was another huge anchor to get me through a time of,
When I say that you're a writer first and an actor second, I mean as your ideal. Mm-hmm. You are an actor. I think you were an actor in a previous lifetime. I think that was the compulsion that when you found it in high school at Choate, you found your vehicle so that you could express who you are. Because when you started acting, you were amazing. And it was like, oh, we know what she's going to be doing. Mm-hmm. It's like, this isn't just play acting for Jody.
Right.
Jody's blooming.
Right.
Right.
Well,
I mean,
when I look
back, did you
back,
feel that?
I felt that it was, I guess when I think about it, I think in a way it was so therapeutic because I'm a super, super self-conscious person and super
mind
nonstop, and then a total mix of introverted and extroverted. Mm-hmm. So people think, well, why would you, if you're self-conscious and have anxiety, why would you be an actor? Well, as somebody once said to me, your blessing is your curse. It's a weird thing. I had, I think I felt less self-conscious and realer in some of the parts that I played when they were good parts for me. And if you're doing theater and it's one of those hard things where you're thinking, I'm not getting this part. It's not really one of my best roles. That's awkward and uncomfortable. And you could have, as I did sometimes, horrible stage fright. But when it's going well, you're totally in it. It is almost like speaking in tongues. It's like something coming through you and you lose all self-consciousness and you're completely sort of, I guess, in flow in the moment. And so whatever that thing was, I felt like, oh, this is my calling, and, it came out of probably lots of neuroticism and all sorts of complicated things, but it felt so right, which is, it's not a great decision to make in terms of, life choices. It's so, flaky. But
here you are 40 years later. Do you have any regrets?
I don't, because it was inevitable. Do you know what I mean? It would be like saying, I wish I had been a different person. Well, you're not. That's what you were and are. And that was the way you decided to focus a lot of your life. And so no regrets about that.
So back to why you actually put this book out. I mean, it is a collection of essays. They are very personal. You're describing an extraordinary victory of the human spirit of you and the family, and the grace of your daughter coming into your life. You are, I believe, the only one on the planet that could have received and taken care of her in this way. I mean, I'm reading here and thinking this was written in heaven. This is like you came on the planet to work out this karma, and she chose to do this for you.
But we were surrounded at a certain point with families like ours, where these people, you have these incredibly loving families, all figuring out how to take care of this child, their children, with some very similar kinds of extreme special needs. So it's an extraordinary world that you never wanted to go near, that you never wanted to know anything about in a way. But then you're all of a sudden, there you are, and you little by little, the terror and the horror as kind of the light, you get used to the dark, and you can see better when you get used to it. And you realize this world is just full of these incredible children with extreme challenges and disabilities and terrible things that have happened to them, either through a birth, like what happened to Luiza, or it happens in utero, or it happens from a virus, or it's genetic. And they have these incredible challenges. And I know there are families where it doesn't work out, and they don't have resources, either emotionally or economically. But there's so many of us that just figure it out for all the lucky, full of grace reasons. And, as my husband would say, to me, Luiza is completely normal. She was we were so lucky. She was so full of joy, so happy.
The picture you put on here is such a beautiful, beautiful picture. The light in her eyes.
I know.
I mean, that's an angel.
Yeah, she was just. Yeah, she had so much going on for her, and just people say, well, what was she? I don't know. She understood everything we seemed to say. She could do a little bit of a yes and a little bit of a no. So that's how we would communicate. And she laughed, she cried, she wanted to see certain movies, she wanted to listen to certain music, certain things. No, I mean, she was incredible child,
Did she ever watch you work?
Yes. When I was doing my first contract of Wicked, it was at this amazing theater in San Francisco, which is like one of their Broadway type theaters, big, beautiful theater called the Orpheum. And I got her a ticket, and our caregiver that was, going to be with her that day. And they had a little section where you could be in a wheelchair. And Luiza came to see me in that. And I have pictures of her with me backstage in my dressing room on the couch. But I think that was probably the only. Oh no, I think they tried, Yatsek, my husband, tried to bring her to a Christmas carol that I did at ACT, which is a big theater in San Francisco. I don't think that was as successful, because sometimes she wasn't comfortable, and she'd be making vocalizations, and people would go, be quiet or something unpleasant.
I was going to ask you about that, her sensitivity, her environmental sensitivity.
Yeah.
Was she hypersensitive?
I would say yes, she was. And I noticed little things, like sometimes when I just be, doing this with her hair to kind of move it back. And if there was a tiny little knot that you'd accidentally hit, you could just tell it would make her sob. And so she had a lot of sensitivity physically, of course. And sometimes no, like I remember her getting shots where I thought, she doesn't seem to feel it. So it was just, it was kerflooey in a way. Um, she had a very high startle reflex, but that's also probably connected to brain damage and levels of spasticity.
Trauma.
Yeah. But she had a great sense of humor. I mean,
did she understand language where you could tell her a joke?
I wouldn't probably tell her jokes, but I'd do things that would make her laugh, because
so she likes slapstick.
Yeah, she liked slapstick. She also had a very dark sense of humor, which we never understood. But my friend said that his former brother-in-law, who had a similar kind of cerebral palsy, he wasn't as disabled, but he was in a wheelchair and nonverbal, and he was also obsessed with death. And sometimes all Luiza wanted us to talk about was who had died.
I recall that passage there.
We never understood it, but and sometimes it was, and she would sometimes, have a very dark sense of humor about some of these stories. Or her sister would be throwing a fit about something and crying, and Luiza would laugh her head off, which drove her sister crazy. But she just wasn't mean. She had nothing mean about her. It was just sometimes slapstick, just like you said. Somebody fell at school and, she laughed.
I thought that your closing chapter of the remodel was an artful stroke of genius.
Oh.
It was because I was a building contractor for over 10 years. I did a whole bunch of remodels. I know the chaos. I know the creativity. I know the disruption.
It's amazing.
And for that, how close was that after Luiza's death?
Quite a while after. That was.
Oh, okay. It seemed like it had occurred recently after, and I said, "Oh, what a great idea to totally refurbish your life."
It took me years. For many reasons, it took me years. But I think it was not until the remodel, which was 5 years after she died, I think her room was still completely her room. The cards, her clothes that were in her drawer. I did all of that very slowly.
Did you do any professional grief management?
No, I was my own
grief counselor.
I was my own grief counselor. I really was. I would go online. I found I did in a way. There's an organization that's wonderful called the Compassionate Friends. And I think they're worldwide. It's a volunteer organization that you Google it and you say, this is where I live. It's for people who have children died or grandchildren. I Googled it when I was on the road with Wicked, because I wasn't home for months and months. And it was miraculous. I thought, well, there'll be something either in Silicon Valley or San Francisco, something. There'll be a meeting. Well, there was a meeting in my town, walking distance from my house, which that's crazy. So I went to that meeting a lot, once a month once a month. Then I found, and I wrote about it, was that incredible Jizo ceremony, which they did at Green Gulch.
Yeah, I know the place. I've been there.
Oh my goodness. So I discovered the information about the Jizo ceremony for people whose children have died, wrote them. I was back home by the time that it was happening. So I would do things like that. And then I did also a lot of collage.
What medium in collage?
I would find a piece of wood that was maybe that thick, maybe this big, and I'd just find things. So I'd have these beautiful decorative papers from this little store near me. I'd cut out strips and rip them, and then I'd have a picture of Luiza, and I just would make these really what I thought were very beautiful collages. So that was really a wonderful thing.
Well, that would have been wonderful to include that in the book.
Yeah. Well, the cover I was hoping could be, I don't know where it is, but there's one that was, it's that image, but it's that image with, that had been collaged, but unfortunately they couldn't make it work. But, so I would never advise anybody or give specific whatever the word is, support, advice about being in this similar state, except to say, these are some of the things I did.
Mm.
But it's also personal, right?
Yeah.
For some reason, I like making things,
You like working with your hands. That's very calming.
Well, I somehow found my way to carving rubber stamps and making stamping doing stamp art, and then mixing that with painting and sometimes collage, and sometimes a picture of a famous painting that I would cut out that would be in on a postcard. And I just found my way instinctually to some form of art making. Again,
that's wonderful.
Not trained.
Do you have a studio in your home?
No, what happened was years ago, I was walking in the neighborhood and I saw this little funky shed being put up in someone's yard. And there was a truck there that said something like shedshop.com.
Yeah.
And my husband and I looked them up and went across the bay, and there was like a big
lot full of sheds.
A bunch of sheds. Yeah. And so they would deal with your town. They dig a little trench so that it had electricity, had lights that worked. They put a little skylight in, 2 windows, and it's probably, I don't even know what it is, 5 by 8. It's tiny.
A studio.
With a little wood floor. My husband found an old discarded funky little wooden dresser that ended up in there with all my supplies little by little. An old desk ended up in there. So I have my bookshelf. It's an incredible place. I haven't been in months because it's cold and I just haven't gotten around to it. But it is the most wonderful. Whenever I go in, I think, I don't know why I don't even live here, because it has the smells of these, essential oils that I've been mixing potions, and then all the papers and watercolor. It's a beautiful place.
That's and it's your backyard.
Yeah, and it's a very small backyard. It's a perfect small backyard. Yeah.
So, what would you like this book to do in the universe? For others, and then also for yourself. I'm really curious.
I think when I think about other people, and because people have said this, and I always think, oh, gee, thank you for saying that. I hope that's true. But friends have said, the book it can be helpful for people that have gone through all sorts of complications, heartbreak, misery, things where you think, I'm not normal, my life is so weird, or whatever, that people that have gone through stuff can read another person being honest about things that have been very difficult, and that you can keep going, and that there can be joy and beauty if you're lucky. I guess it's part of it is luck. Because I've read so many memoirs over my life. That was what I loved. I loved, like, how do these people live? How does anybody live? How do you make a life? All those questions I think I always had. And so I guess there's that hope that, it could touch something in somebody that is positive for them, and gives them some good spark of something. I also have this fantasy, which is, we went through the medical world for a certain period of time, because Luiza was pretty healthy for a long, long time. And then what happens with kids like Luiza is they don't have strong, their muscle tone is all messed up. So they don't have good, strong swallow muscles. She couldn't hold up her trunk. So everything is bad in terms of this canal. And then these kids can get pneumonias. They can get aspiration.
Respiratory, yeah, right.
Yeah, because liquid that's in your mouth ends up in your lungs. You get terrible infections. Yeah. And that is usually what will happen. At some point, you'll have an aspiration pneumonia that doesn't get cured, or that, you can't survive.
And you knew that early on, that you're surrounded by this risk from...
I knew it at some point.
And as you said, you're watching in the book, the children start dying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's
and
when
she has this black humor about it.
Yeah.
Because somehow she's aware.
I don't know what that humor part of it was, but early on, I mean, I'm sure even before we got to the school and we were still in New York, like have this memory of, oh my God, actually she had a pneumonia when she was maybe 2 or something, or 3. And I don't think it registered, which is good because it's nice to have more hope. Periods of your life when you want that be in the hope and you don't want the reality at that point. But yeah, moving out here, and then it started to really dawn on me, this is not going to really go well. And then there was the issues around all these kids at the school, and it happened, years apart sometimes. But then, I started doing lots of doctor appointments and getting her to pulmonologists to say, look, this little girl died. One day she was fine. 4 days later, she was gone. Please check out everything. And we want to do everything to keep Luiza, healthy and strong. So the whole world of the medical community, I went through it all pretty much extremely feeling grateful that we met such amazing doctors.
I got that in your acknowledgments. It was beautiful. Yeah, and I felt that.
Some of them were doing their residency in pediatrics.
You mentioned that. I got that.
Oh man. So I do have this kind of fantasy, which is that I could somehow connect with people that are going to be pediatricians. Because these are the kids that end up being in hospitals for long periods of time. And the slang term, if you work in a hospital, is they're called frequent flyers.
Right. You mentioned that. Yeah.
We realized, Luiza's a frequent flyer. And when they're, you're meeting all these residents, and I loved being in a teaching hospital. I loved it because they're people to connect with. They're people to say, you want them to love your child and be interested in your child. So you're there and you're talking to them and trying to get information, and they're learning from the families because they're going to be dealing with families and they're going to be dealing with families that have to make decisions. What procedures are you going to do this intervention? Are you not going to do this intervention? Her pulmonologist, her main guy that we loved, it became clear she needed to get a trach. She needed a permanent little tube to keep her breathing clear. And we went through months and months and months of trying to make this decision. And that's just what it was. And at some point after we'd made the decision, her doctor said, I'd love it if you just would write up something about your decision-making process. And I was so happy, to be asked. I was happy to do it and to write it because it was all so vivid and clear what that had been for us. So
that's beautiful.
So connecting with that world would be, I don't know how to do it, but that's. In the medical, my dad was a professor of medicine for 50 years, and they used to have people come in from the outside to share their perspective to the interns, the med students. So to round them out because they're in such an intensive silo learning experience. So you might just reach out to some of the head of the Department of Medicines around the country. We have right down the freeway is Stanford Medical School. So that's another reason.
And USF is up in the city. So
yeah. So yes. Oh, and a friend of mine, actually, he's an actor. His wife is a pediatrician. And he had bought the book because we were at Boston University together, and I had posted about it on Facebook. So he read it, and he said, before I read it, I gave it to my wife, Carol, and she read it, and she wrote, she said, every pediatrician should read this.
I agree.
And I just said, I wrote him back a few days later. I said, David, was there any way that she would write that down and I could put it in my, my little author website? So, I've included that, and I'm hoping through my slow tortoise and the hare approach. I'm the tortoise. just little steps here and there, that I will get to share the book with some doctors, with lay people like myself. And that's what I'm hoping.
That's beautiful. Do you have any favorite sections in the book that you would enjoy reading a section for me right now?
Oh, well, I did a reading at a bookstore in New York right after the book was the publishing date. My sister just started writing a local independent bookstore in my old neighborhood on the Upper East Side.
Yes.
And I had to decide, what am I going to read? So I wanted to pick things that weren't too tragic, weren't too dark. So
you don't have to be protective in this setting. I would prefer you read something that really moves your heart, because I believe.
I happen to have a copy right here. What a surprise!
Oh, how wonderful!
I think one of the early things I wrote, because when Luiza was a baby, we were living at my parents' apartment because I don't know, we just ended up literally walking in 2 days after she was born. We had to leave her in the hospital for 10 days. They were down the block, so we walked in and never left for 9 months.
9 months. What page are you going to read from?
I was thinking of reading the first page, or
the Afghanistan page?
Yeah.
Oh, good, because I was going to say earlier when you were speaking, it's a place you never want to go. You can't. Did you ace that with using Afghanistan as the metaphor?
Well, the thing was, when Luiza was a baby and we were living at my parents' and we were having, meetings with doctors once in a while, because it was when we still didn't know, had something happened or not. All of a sudden people said, "Oh, no, don't worry. My baby had seizures when she was born. Don't worry." The next person said, "Oh, what else? What else were we trying to normalize?" Mainly it was the seizure thing, like having seizures as soon as the baby's born. But there were other things that I can't remember. But the idea being, don't worry, which was exactly what I needed to hear, because we didn't know for months that this was brain damage, serious brain damage. We thought, oh, she had a scary. Oh, yeah. The other one was, don't worry, my baby didn't breathe right away. Don't worry. What a miracle that I have those, that kept me going. And as things started to become clearer that things were not working out, that she wasn't doing certain things. She wasn't, using her body in a developmental way that was appropriate. And I remember talking to a social worker at New York Hospital who was helping us with this thing called early intervention, where your child would get some services from the state, such as physical therapy and feeding therapy and things to help. And I kind of said, I don't want to don't let anybody say anything to me that's going to freak me out. So nobody did. And I think at some point I was saying to her, I'm kind of freaking out myself now. And she sent me this thing that many parents are sent when they get the diagnosis that their child is very either disabled or has Down syndrome, who was the original writer of what I'm going to explain. She sent me this thing called Welcome to Holland. And that's what I mentioned in this little chapter. It was getting that, and then going through this kind of terrifying period of time thinking, I really liked Welcome to Holland. It's really nice. But it was someday I'm going to write about that, and I'm going to use a different metaphor. So that's
you have the stage, madam.
That's my preamble. Landing in Afghanistan. Someone once compared having a disabled child to landing in a different country than originally planned. Your dreams and guidebooks were for Italy and all its treasures, and Holland, though beautiful, was not what you wanted. You had waited your whole life to see this ancient country with its art and monuments and passionate, gesticulating people, and your plans were inexplicably ruined. You were planning your life with a normal child, and your actual child was not what you expected, and life would be different. Your heart would rip open beyond what you thought was possible. The plane landed in Holland, a country that you had no interest in going to, but if you opened your eyes and accepted this new world, its beauty would be revealed. I liked the analogy. It had been faxed to me by our hospital social worker when Luiza was an infant, and it had become clear that she had sustained a brain injury at birth that wasn't magically disappearing as I had hoped. The plasticity of the brain wasn't working out. A catastrophic accident had occurred. There had been a cosmic mistake. God had chosen the wrong person for this test. I was too weak to cope. Because I was so weak and hysterical, Luiza would have to be okay. This was as clear as I could figure it out. I believed in this rule. Only strong people could survive something like this. Luiza would be fine. This reasoning kept me walking and talking when I longed to drop to the floor and writhe and rend my garments. Holland was a gentle place in my mind. I knew that they had a high percentage of home births. It was filled with Rembrandts and the sacred memory of Anne Frank. They could all speak English. I wanted to write my version of this unexpected landing. We had not arrived in Western Europe. There were no tulips. No English was spoken. It was on the other side of the planet from where we were hoping to go. Terrorists had stolen our plane. We had crash landed in Afghanistan. Our daughter had barely survived the landing. Her brain was exploding with seizures. Babies were dying. Mothers would arrive at the NICU and be told that their tiny premature babies would not survive. We wore yellow paper hospital robes and held Luiza, who slept for 6 days, flooded with phenobarbital to protect her from more seizures. They gave us rocking chairs between the clear plastic isolates so I could try and nurse. She was nourished with my breast milk through a feeding tube in her nose. Her seizures became almost invisible, but then a little gray, ashy color would spread around her mouth and she was seizing again. I thought Luiza was dying. Yelling from me brought nurses who explained that it was not death. Her brain was just convulsing, and because she was so sedated with barbiturates, all that showed was a lowering of oxygen in her face. Holland couldn't be this terrifying. This was a dystopia. Birth and near death. Baby rushed into territory of hospital with other doomed babies. Giant radioactive machines being wheeled around close to babies. Babies who were see-through and not quite finished. Eyes taped shut. Sporting hand-knit, volunteer-donated wool caps to maintain their body heat. Incomprehensible language being spoken. No guidebooks for Afghanistan. War unending. You could die of exposure in the frozen mountains. A terrorist could blow you up. Only way in was by warplane or a crash landing. But the people were famous for their hospitality. They would share their last cup of tea. The beauty of the land was extreme. People lived there and raised families. The love was fierce. Someday, I thought, someday I would write my version of Luiza's early days and how it was. It is hard to breathe when I remember this time. I don't know if I've read that out loud. Maybe I have.
That was beautiful.
Thank you for asking.
Can you pick a funny section that you can read for us?
Well, I'm thinking
that made you, when you wrote it, just the absurdity of it. You said, I've got to write this down. I got to capture this in language because it's the absurdity of being human.
Okay. Judge Jody. I was a harsh judge I noticed everything. If I was sitting across from someone on the subway who was barefoot in sandals, I would inspect their feet. I would stare at the toes. Toenails were almost trance-inducing. Sometimes the nails curled over the ends of the toes like armor. I would wonder how someone with such sad feet could display them in public. Did they not know how grotesque they were? Why didn't they hide them? I hated my feet. I pretended they were different by arching and pointing them. I didn't want to be a cruel judge. I knew how ugly it was to have these thoughts, but it was like a voice inside my head that would just say things when people passed by. Huge fat fanny walking by. Big flat feet with monkey toes. Man with hair plugs. I felt compassionate toward the suffering masses, but I also noticed every blackhead constellation and skin tag on their face. As I walked down West End Avenue with Luiza in her therapeutic stroller with a headrest and an airplane-style seatbelt, I was happy accepting mother with crippled child. I was not looking out of my eyes at the sidewalk traffic, but watching myself as I pushed Lou toward the physical therapist on Riverside Drive. I knew people were staring unless they were too oblivious to notice the beautiful tilting child strapped into her oversized, reclining, high-tech stroller. I was careful to arrange my facial features into a serene look so that the mothers of hopping, dancing children would not pity me. I brightened my eyes and smiled what I hoped looked like the smile of a wise, loving woman who was deeply at peace. If the stranger stared at Luiza, I would watch the staring woman and stop pushing until the woman passed next to us, unaware of the staring mask on her face. Then I would bark, "Hello!" and the unaware, staring, pity-filled stranger would come back to reality and wonder why the mother of this crippled child was so belligerent. Before Luiza, I don't ever remember seeing crippled children in wheelchairs. I probably would have averted my eyes if I had. I would have looked away because who can bear to see a child in a wheelchair? Like passing whales, the fish market on Madison Avenue when I walked to school, my nose just automatically stopped breathing as I passed. I'd always been fascinated with fictional crippled children. There was something undeniable about a crippled child. Dickens understood this. Tiny Tim in A Christmas Carol and Smike in Nicholas Nickleby. We are crippled on the inside and they are crippled on the outside and sometimes very serene. Unless, of course, they're suffering from terrible pain, and then serenity is not part of the picture. My favorite play in drama school was A Day in the Death of Joe Egg by Peter Nichols, about a severely disabled child who was nonverbal and prone to seizures. I was transfixed with the suffering of the mother. And what about the children? I always wondered, why can't they walk? What went wrong? After my daughter was born, when it was completely unclear what would happen, I saw crippled children everywhere. Tiny children in enormous black wheelchairs. Once at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I saw a woman with 2 children in wheelchairs, twins. She and her husband were walking through the museum, pushing their 2 children. They looked European. I think they were smiling. I knew that it couldn't happen to me because I would go crazy. I remember her first wheelchair. First, there had been the therapeutic stroller when Luiza was about 2. A rolling chair that sort of looked like a regular stroller, but more technical. More belts and side supports and a shelf to rest her feet. Kind of a wheelchair in training. A couple of years later, a new therapist was summoned for a seating evaluation. And in 2 months, she returned with the newly arrived, authentic, "My child will never walk, sit, or hold up her head" wheelchair. 70 pounds of joy, with all the beauty of an electric chair on wheels, black on black. The quickie zippy. When I was alone with this vinyl and metal monstrosity for the first time, I fell forward onto my knees, grabbed the black metal and leatherette armrests, and wept. It's a big step to get the first wheelchair. It's one of the milestones. a real fire walk. I can remember that like it was yesterday.
I felt it.
And that's a long time ago. Wow. Yeah, strange.
You are a remarkable human being.
Well, we all are going through all sorts of things in life. And it's strange what comes up, right?
Yeah.
We all have to go through these things.
Some people choose not to. Some people check out. They go numb. They medicate. But your spirit, the spirit of wanting to live in the face of these disasters, is so impressive. It's such a dynamic example of your soul, of a Buddha. You are the personification of a Buddha. Every human being is a Buddha. But the ones that are the Buddhas, the ones that wake up and behave like one. And that means to confront and overcome the hardships that they come in with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've demonstrated that in such a remarkable way. When I met you at the theater there in LA, but when was that? That you were on tour?
That was the beginning, either 2000... the end of 2018 or the very beginning of 2019, because we were in LA for about 9 weeks, December.
Right.
Yeah, December, January.
I couldn't possibly do what she's doing night after night, show after show. I wanted to ask you about that. How have you managed the tedium of the work of being an actor? Well,
I kind of feel like that's over. I really feel like I was an actor for 40 years, off and on. Obviously, you don't work for big chunks of time. And then if you're lucky, you get a show and you run it for almost 2 years, and you're doing 8 shows a week for 2 years. Wicked came into my life. I ended up doing 7 contracts with them over a period of time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes 1 month I would fill in for somebody on Broadway, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I would do an 8-month contract. It just depended. And the one that you saw me in, that ended up being 12 months on the road.
Exhausting.
You know, because of my personality, whatever combo package I have, I never got tired of, like, a lot of people would hate, certain actors, like, how can you, actors would say, oh God, I can't stand, can't stand doing, 8 shows a week. How do you do that? It drives me crazy. I'm doing television or movies or whatever they're doing. Mm-hmm. Or they would do a run that would last 3 months and they'd think, thank God that's over, because 8 shows a week. It was not the lead. I don't know how those girls sang those parts 8 shows a week. I had this perfect part that wove in and out of the story, had these really fun scenes, sang just a little, and just the perfect amount that didn't freak me out because of my nerves. So for me, every night you're backstage waiting to go on, and you got to be in the moment. Sometimes you are more than others, but anything can go wrong. You can go up, what's called going up, where you can't remember what the line is. Doesn't usually happen, but that can happen. People have fallen. You have to be so alive, so aware. And all of that just always kept it new and exciting for me. And also because of what that part was. It's not too much. It's not too little that it's boring. It was just this perfect gift that they kept giving me. That is
beautiful. That's how you did
it. And you never know who's going to like you. Like, lots of people have done that role, and they did it once and they never did it again. And these are good people, good actors. For whatever reason, management and the people that made the decisions liked me the first time they saw when I was doing it for 8 months in San Francisco. And
when was that?
That was in 2010, from roughly February to September. Okay. And the person that had the contract before me, who's, they usually hire somebody for, let's say, 9 months, a year, and then they'll get the next person. The person that had the contract before me was Patty Duke. And Patty Duke was the woman that I was learning the part at home before I started rehearsals. And then you communicate with your stage manager and say, when can I trail her backstage? Because you want to learn your backstage. Where are you going to be? Where do you stand when the 10 people come running off stage so you don't get hit? Where do you stand for your next entrance? Where all of that stuff. So they talked to the actor, and in this case, it was Patty Duke. They said, this is a good night. Come on Tuesday night. So I'm brought into her dressing room where she's getting made up because she's getting made up. It's a ton of makeup. There's her husband. She was so sweet. She was so warm. She's the kind of person when you're talking to her, even if you're just meeting her for the first time before you're taking her part in a hallway, which is how I first met her, because I was there to see a friend do another part before I knew I was going to ever be in it. She looks at you right in the eye. She's not looking over your shoulder to see who else is coming. She is so in the moment and so with you. So then here I am meeting her, and I'm the person that's getting the next contract. And she basically holds my hand, takes me backstage, says, okay, stand here. Don't come out in front of this because 10 of them are running off. I'll meet you back here to take you to the next scene. She was the loveliest person. At one point she said, I'm so happy the part is going to a loving person. She was incredible. So that's how I started in that world. And I'm sure the cast thought, who's this? Who's Jody Gelb? She's a nobody. We had Patty Duke. You know, it's just fate. Okay, they decided they wanted me after her contract was finished because they just hire you for a certain period of time. I'm sure she didn't want to continue. It's a lot of being away from home or whatever. But I was so lucky. And then for whatever reason, they liked me and they kept giving me other jobs with that show. And it was a huge gift because I at that point didn't know if I was going to continue because of some certain stage fright issues I'd had.
You mentioned that.
At the big theater at ACT, which is American Conservatory Theater, which is a resident theater that's been in San Francisco, golly, since, I don't know, the 60s maybe. It's, I had been thinking, I think I better stop this. And then
when was the last time you were on stage?
Was with Wicked. I haven't been on the stage since Wicked. And that was Salt Lake City. Soon after I saw you, my part of the tour, my 12 months, ended after about 2 or 3 weeks in Salt Lake City. February, let's say February 20th, 2019. And then the last acting job I ever did was I worked for a couple of days on one of those series on cable, on Peacock, called Dr. Death. And it was based on a true story of a horrific, I think he was an orthopedic surgeon from Texas who was injuring and accidentally killing people.
Oh my! Because
he was
intentionally killing people. Not
intentionally, but just because of making terrible, terrible decisions. And it was during the pandemic. The business was starting up again. We had to test all the time. You had to keep your mask on until the scene happened. So none of it really made sense, but it was so great that they were working. And I got this really, it was like 14 hours nonstop day where you're just, shooting your little scene. You're the guest with some other people. Meryl Streep's daughter was one of the actors who I was, in a hallway with chatting. And,
Do you know Meryl Streep?
No. But it was such a fun job. And I thought, I love that, but it's hard, it's hard to get those jobs. And then I was just focusing more on this. And I don't know. I mean, I'd like to do it maybe when I'm old, really old. Because I know I'm supposedly old now, even though I don't feel it.
You're not old. You don't look old.
It's a little scene like that where they do hire nobodies once in a while, and you have a nice little scene. It's so great. it's so fun to be on a set, to watch other people work. And if you have a good atmosphere and, good director and people are well behaved and supportive.
Like The Crown or something like that.
Well, no, because that's almost everybody's famous pretty much, or at a certain level. But just, the stuff that there's so many shows being done now. So I'm not pursuing it, though.
You have an agent?
I don't know. I've had a freelance agent. That's who got me that. I've had them for a long time, but I'm just not. I'm out.
You're not putting yourself out. Right?
Yeah.
Well, are you writing now?
No. I've been writing because of the book where someone's helping me do some of the public stuff. Like he helped me get some interviews. I did another one or two. No, I did a podcast months ago. And then I did an interview with a local publication that's out of San Francisco. And then he'll say, oh, can you write something for this? And then I'll write that. I wanted to do something with the Compassionate Friends. So I wrote them and they said, okay, yeah, write a piece. So I wrote a piece for them. Things like that are related to the book right now. So but I'd like to do some micro pieces. But
some more micro pieces, more memoir stuff.
Yeah. So
well, you've got it in you.
So we'll see.
And then it's really remarkable that
what's interesting is my mother, she felt compelled in her, I don't know, was it her 60s? She was a writer that was constantly writing and working at it. And she wanted to write about her childhood in the Adirondacks. And she ended up self-publishing it because she, like me, thought, I'm not going to send this to 200 people. So she just self-published it. But basically, it's a memoir of her growing up in the Depression in the Adirondacks and the strangeness of her family. And almost at the same age, I'm realizing, that, as I mentioned in the book, the WASPs were going down the drain in the 30s. The Jews started going up.
I thought that was beautiful.
Well, it's
absolutely beautiful.
It's like a fairy. It's it's an amazing story where by the time my mother was growing up, there's nothing. They were running out of money completely, and she had the sense of that very strongly. That until like when she was out of the house and had married my father, and we were starting to grow up, the oil bill couldn't be paid anymore. And my dad took over my grandparents' situation and helped everybody in the family. But, one generation comes and goes and it can just all go.
Yes. Yeah. So Jody, of all of these essays, if you only could pick one, the herald of this book, for somebody who's thinking about buying your book, which one should they read?
Oh, Jesse, that's too tough a question. I would have had to study for this test.
Well, let me ask you this. Which of these essays do you love the most?
That's like saying, which child do you love? I'd really have to look through it because it's quite a mix.
What page would you wish somebody landed on?
Oh, here's a chapter. It's called The Fifth Neurologist. That would intrigue me. The fifth neurologist. The neurologist put the MRI of Luiza's brain up on the X-ray light box. I watched his long fingers as he slid each image into the rubber grippers. Now that's very personal in terms of, I loved finding books about people talking about medicine and children with issues. I was, before Luiza, always drawn to this subject. So for me, that would be intriguing because I would be wondering, oh my God, how did they do that? Your child's brain x-rays, your MRI is up on a light board. So yeah, for me, that would be it. But for other people, it really depends on what they're interested in, what would grab them. And some people would just go, oh, something wrong with a child, I don't want to go anywhere near that.
In closing, what has writing this book done for you?
As I tried to write about in the chapter, which has something to do with, I wish I was a Buddhist or something like that.
I've read The Buddhists, yeah.
I don't know if it is the Buddhists, but this idea and this saying that a lot of us have heard and learned over the years, which is that you don't have to believe your thoughts. I wish I had learned that earlier because, and I think I said that in the book, because I had, terrible thoughts of like, just get rid of yourself. What's the point? Not to the degree where I would ever do it, but just, that suicidal ideation that some people have that will never take them there. But it's a torture that you do to yourself. Some of what this book did for me, I guess, is I finished something that for so many years I was tortured in my head, which was, you can't finish it. You're not going to be able to do this at so many levels because you're not a real writer. You're not this, you're not that. You can't do this. Why are you torturing yourself and putting yourself in this position where you're going to fail because you can't do it? Miraculously, somehow, I did finish this book. I worked with that incredible editor, Scott Parker, with the fine-tuning, just the little fine-tuning here and there. And it did get finished. And because of Megan Daum giving my name to the publishers, it got published. And that has been like a gift that I maybe I did secretly imagine, but that it's happened has been a dream come true that I really was not sure. I didn't think it would happen. And it's a huge, huge gift. And also the time that I spent in my real life with my daughter, and then the time that I spent with her in my imagination in the writing of this it's been a huge gift. I keep using that word, but that's what it is for me.
Jody, it has been my honor and my pleasure to have this time with you and to open up the world to your gifts. You are a writer, my friend. I am so proud of you and so happy for you. I'm going to do what I can to get the word out.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It's been so great to reconnect.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed my dialogue with author Jody Gelb as much as I did. To purchase her soul-stirring book, the brand new micro-memoir, She May Be Lying Down, But She May Be Happy, you can go to Amazon or to her website at jodygelb.com, where you will find a list of her current book distributors. I'm Jesse Dean, founder of the Open Window Institute for Emotional Freedom. To learn more about our work, you can go to our website at www.owpro.com. That's owpro.com. Thank you for watching or listening, and until we see you again, remember, the key to an open heart is an open mind.